my colleague, Mr. Christian Murphy, just talked about was just blatant racism. Like, I'm gonna just call a thing a thing. Like, this administration is racist. That he has always been a racist, and that is what we are enduring in this country.
Here we go again. Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas just compared modern ICE enforcement to slave patrols. Let that sink in. A sitting member of Congress just compared federal agents enforcing immigration law, the law she swore an oath to uphold, by the way, to the brutal squads that hunted down enslaved people in the 1700s and 1800s. This is what passes for discourse in today's Democratic Party. No nuance, no facts, just inflammatory race baiting designed to shut down any legitimate conversation about border security. Let's get some facts straight. Slave patrols were organized groups of armed men established first in South Carolina in 1704, who monitored and enforced discipline upon slaves, capturing runaways and crushing any form of organized resistance through systematic terror and violence. They operated without warrants, entered anyone's home at will, and used whippings and brutal physical punishment as standard practice. Now let's talk about ICE enforcement in 2025. When ICE detains someone, families can locate them within 24 hours using the online detainee locator system, a public web-based tool available 24/7 in multiple languages. ICE detainees have access to attorneys, can post bond at designated offices nationwide, and family members can visit at detention facilities with proper coordination. There's a transparent legal process. There are courts. There are due process rights. Does that sound like a slave patrol to you? Of course not. But Crockett isn't interested in facts. She's interested in emotion, in stoking racial division, in making outrageous comparisons that insult the actual victims of slavery. And here's the kicker. Jasmine Crockett was born in 1981. Slavery ended in 1865. So no, Congresswoman, you haven't seen a slave patrol. You haven't experienced slavery. You have no actual frame of reference for what you're describing. You're using the suffering of enslaved people as a political weapon.
Let me give you some facts behind this racism. And they get mad when I say the things that I say, but I will not stop speaking the truth. Number one, I said that what we were experiencing in this country felt like what I would imagine slave patrols to look like. And frankly, anybody that knows anything about slave patrols, this is exactly what it was like. We're talking about lawless people that are going around with no warrants or anything, and it's all about rounding people up and disappearing them. That is what's currently taking place. And interestingly enough, even though modern day policing was born out of slave patrols, when I was speaking with one of my friends who is a federal law enforcement officer, he told me that one of the things that he has observed is that the culture is created at the top.
Hold on. Stop right there. Crockett just claimed that modern-day policing was born out of slave patrols. This is a far-left talking point that needs to be corrected because it's a deliberate distortion of history. Yes, slave patrols existed in the South from 1704 until the Civil War. They were one form of early law enforcement in slave-holding states, tasked with controlling slave populations and preventing uprisings. Nobody denies this dark chapter. It happened. It was evil. But that's not the whole story. Here's what Crockett conveniently leaves out. The first publicly funded, organized police force with full-time officers was created in Boston in 1838, a northern city that had abolished slavery decades earlier, created by businessmen to protect shipping interests and commercial property. Boston never had slave patrols. So how did their police department originate from something that never existed there? Professional policing in America actually originated from English criminal justice reform advocates like Henry Fielding, Patrick Colquhoun, and Sir Robert Peel. Policing has existed for centuries. Augustus Caesar created police forces in ancient Rome in 27 BC, and England had constables and justices of the peace in the 1600s. Did some former slave patrollers become police officers in the South after the Civil War? Yes, Southern police departments did carry over some aspects, though African Americans also joined police forces during Reconstruction. But that doesn't mean all modern policing, from Seattle to Atlanta to New York, descends from slave patrols. That's intellectually dishonest. Every decent country has police, including non-white countries. Japan, Nigeria, Brazil, India, they all have police. Did their forces originate from American slave patrols? Of course not. Policing is universal because crime is universal. To claim that enforcing laws against murder, rape, and robbery is rooted in racism is dangerous. Black communities deserve protection from crime just as much as anyone else. But the radical left cherry-picks history to delegitimize all law enforcement. It's lazy thinking wrapped in righteous indignation.
Now, we've talked about how they have hidden themselves, but again, it reminds me of the Klan. That is why I proposed the Clear ID Act to make them identify themselves, because it is dangerous for law enforcement as well as individuals, because you don't know, especially with ICE going around and doing the things that thugs do. They're busting out windows, they're breaking into homes, they're breaking people's arms. This doesn't sound like law enforcement. It sounds like thuggery to me.
Let's dig deeper into this breaking people's arms rhetoric. Crockett is painting a picture of jackbooted thugs randomly assaulting innocent people. That's not what's happening, and we need to be honest about the reality of immigration enforcement. When ICE conducts operations, they're targeting specific individuals who have violated immigration law. In large-scale raids at work sites and manufacturing plants, ICE is assisted by CBP and other federal and state agencies. And while DHS says they're targeting violent criminals, gang members, and serious offenders, the data shows the majority detained don't have serious criminal convictions. But here's what Crockett doesn't want to talk about. When people resist arrest, when they run, when they fight, when they refuse to comply, force becomes necessary. Some citizens and bystanders who have interfered with ICE operations have been detained, including people filming arrests and those trying to obstruct operations. And yes, sometimes that results in injuries. Is it pretty? No, but policing has never been pretty. When you're dealing with people who broke the law to enter the country, who know they're here illegally, who have been told by activists and politicians like Crockett that they should resist, what do you expect to happen? There have been at least 20 deaths in ICE custody in 2025, the deadliest year since 2004, which former ICE officials attribute to increased detention population, decreased oversight, and the types of arrests being made. Picking people up on the street versus at the border where health information is more readily available. That's a serious concern that deserves scrutiny. ICE should have adequate medical facilities and staff. But let's be real about what's driving these numbers. ICE is being forced to detain more people because Democrats refused to secure the border for 4 years under Biden. Now that enforcement is back, the system is overwhelmed. That's not ICE's fault. That's the fault of politicians like Jasmine Crockett, who spent years advocating for sanctuary cities and resisting deportations.
Well, I've got news for you. You see, we've been talking about the cruel and unusual punishment that is in violation of the 8th Amendment that is being handed out. And honestly, it's a spit in the face of every American that we have an actual convicted felon that feels aggrieved to the extent that he feels like he's owed hundreds of millions of dollars when people are literally dying.
Crockett's talking about cruel and unusual punishment and claiming this violates the 8th Amendment. Let's talk about what's actually cruel. Allowing a broken immigration system to continue unchecked, creating incentives for people to make dangerous journeys to the border, and then acting shocked when enforcement happens. What's cruel is telling people they can come to America illegally and there will be no consequences. What's cruel is sanctuary cities that shield violent criminals from deportation. What's cruel is the sexual assault, the human trafficking, and the cartel violence that flourishes when borders aren't enforced. ICE agents currently aren't required to wear body cameras, can cover their faces, don't have to provide badge numbers or identify themselves, can arrive in unmarked cars, and don't need a warrant from a judge to detain someone for immigration violations. Is that ideal? Maybe not. Should there be more transparency? Perhaps. But ICE operates with broad enforcement powers because Congress granted them those powers, because immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility that requires flexibility to work effectively. And let's be clear, when Crockett calls ICE enforcement cruel, what she's really saying is that any enforcement is cruel. That's the end game here. The goal isn't better enforcement, it's no enforcement. Here's the bottom line. Jasmine Crockett's entire political identity is built on race. She has dedicated her career to civil rights advocacy, from defending Black Lives Matter activists to introducing resolutions on racial healing and systemic racism. That's her lane, and civil rights work is important. But there's a difference between fighting for civil rights and weaponizing race to shut down legitimate policy debates. When you compare ICE agents to slave patrols, you're not engaging in honest discourse. You're engaging in emotional manipulation. You're exploiting the suffering of enslaved people to score political points. The reality is this: America has immigration laws. Those laws exist to protect American workers, maintain national security, and preserve the rule of law. When they aren't enforced, chaos follows. We saw it at the southern border under Biden. We saw sanctuary cities overwhelmed with migrants. We saw communities across America dealing with the consequences. Now immigration laws are being enforced again, and people like Jasmine Crockett are melting down because enforcement exposes the bankruptcy of their position. They can't defend open borders directly, so instead they call it racist. They call it cruel. They compare it to slavery. It's dishonest. It's inflammatory, and the American people see right through it. If we let politicians like Crockett redefine law enforcement as racism, we've lost the ability to govern ourselves. That's what's at stake. Whether America remains a nation of laws or becomes a nation where laws are enforced selectively based on which politician is offended. This is about control. This is about power, and it's about a radical wing of the Democratic Party that wants to fundamentally transform America by erasing our borders and our sovereignty. Stand up, speak out, support the men and women of ICE who are doing the hard, thankless work of enforcing our laws, despite being called slavers and thugs by members of Congress who should know better.